suggestion, since we have a presenter that's remote, you have the ability to move agenda items as you see fit. I don't know if we want to move that one up to the first, so we can
Okay.
have him present and he can go on his way.
Okay,
All right, that's gonna be your
Yeah.
call.
Doesn't make way too much sense.
that's fine with me.
All right.
I think it's punishment for not coming in person, which was kind of our idea.
Determine the right thing.
I am.
I think that swivel it up and then tilt. I think it's what that thing is. Just looking at it, maybe that's what it does.
There we
There you go.
go.
There you go. Now we're cooking.
Oh, it's time. All right. So it is 3 o'clock. I guess we should get started here. We've got a few things to do. So,
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd recommend that we move number 3 to the top of the agenda. We have a presenter from Kimley Horn on the phone with us, or on web-based
Okay.
meeting, and if it's okay with you, we could have him start first so he can go about his business.
it's fine with me.
Okay, Jeff, are you there? You able to hear us?
I can hear y'all loud and clear.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, what we asked Jeff to step in is talk to us about the next steps for the master plan for downtown. We, of course, had that approved by the city council. Jeff has worked with us on several projects, from our transportation master plans to our impact fees that the city is looking at implementing for development. So we've had a long-standing relationship with Jeff, and he'll give us the next steps, let us know how we progress from here. The contract has been executed and it's on file with the city secretary, and I provided the chairman a copy of that agreement as well. So I'll turn it over to Jeff and he can talk next steps.
Thank you. We're really excited. Kim and I's really excited about getting moving on this master plan. We've been working through with you and council to get this approved and adopted, so we're ready to go on to the next steps. Our first step, our first step is familiarizing us with the current master plan and really doing an evaluation of the current master plan, just at top level. And while we're doing that, we're going to be setting up some of the internal website for the project, survey, and interactive feedback map. So over the next month to 2 months, we're going to be working on evaluating the current master plan and getting all the public-facing items ready to be released to the public. So although it may not seem like we're starting right away, but we are getting everything set up to start so that we can have a kind of a full engaged kickoff really right when the summer happens. Our success as lead, and when we start doing this, it's sometimes hard to coordinate workshops and meetings during the summer. So we're targeting to really start the work session, which is our task 2, at the very beginning of the fall. Sometime in September, we have to work with you on the schedules to make sure that we have the right date. Our plan is to have a 3-day in-person workshop where we bring our subject matter experts in and to work through those. We'll have the website launched before that so we can get some input before that. We use that input to help on the workshop. And we'll work through the workshop over those 3 days that culminates with the community presentation at the end. What did we learn with the workshop? Where are we going? And that will happen sometime in September. After that, we'll go back, work on the document for this, which will really focus on what is the catalytic projects and implementation for the master plan. And that can kind of serve as an amendment to the current master plan. And that will happen shortly after the work session, a month or so after the work session, we'll have that wrapped up to present to y'all. That's kind of an overview. Probably looks about, between a 4 and 6 month schedule, depending on when we get those meetings set up and make sure we can coordinate with everyone's calendar so that we can get the maximum people to participate as possible. With that, that's kind of a brief overview of our next steps. With that, I'll take any questions from the board on my Habit project.
We have any questions?
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think it's important, I know, and I have had this conversation with Jeff this morning, to make sure that everyone understands that even though we're not starting immediately with the public hearings, that they are validating the existing plan, they are reviewing that, they're doing a lot of the behind the scene items such as the website that's going to be set up for the public input and things of that nature. So that ball is rolling on the background, and as Jeff said, they'll continue to work with us on starting our stakeholder meetings, of course, DOI, the TIRZ board, city council, those various groups, and of course the public as we move forward.
I have a question.
One thing I might add is that we would typically bring the website and the survey to this group first before it releases to the public to get y'all's feedback. So once that gets formalized, we'll bring it to you before it necessarily goes to the greater audience.
Okay, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, on the stakeholders, do y'all initiate who to contact, or is it just kind of thrown out and everybody can come, or we need the feedback from the general public as well as from stakeholders, people downtown, those type of things?
A little bit of both. The short answer is we're going to use the board as kind of our advisory group on here. We'll ask the city and board for a list of strategic stakeholders that we can meet in smaller groups during the workshop. So we plan kind of on our temporary agenda to have 3 different sessions with 3 different stakeholder groups. And then we'll have the public at large meetings. So a little bit of both. So we'll be looking for this group, this board, city staff to provide us a list of strategic stakeholders to make sure that they have opportunity to come talk to us on a small group or one-on-one basis. And then the larger group will be able to give input as well. So we'll have a little bit of both.
Just out of curiosity, Toby or Craig, when y'all did this the last time, how many community stakeholder meetings, not just I'm not talking about the small group stakeholder meetings, but the public at large meetings did y'all have?
I was involved in 2 that I remember, but I'm sure there's probably, I know there was more meetings with different people. That's all I can tell you I was involved with.
And I apologize, Mr. Norris, I wasn't part of the last plan as well, but I do think that with the 3 meetings that we have established through this agreement, that we'll be able to catch people. And as part of Kimberly Horn's project, they do have the ability for folks to jump in online and give their feedback as well if they can't catch those meetings.
And I think that's a discussion for down the road.
Sure.
That was just from my own curiosity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dale, how many meetings did you attend in the last master plan? I remember being in a couple, 2 or 3, but I don't know.
I'm kind of having a hard time remembering what happened when. There was a large meeting at the Ector Theater, but that's been several years ago. I think that's before what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
I don't really remember.
Well, I was on at the time it was called Downtown Odessa, I think, Main Street.
Main Street.
Main Street Odessa. And we had some meetings, through Main Street. Also, I attended the meeting at the Ector, that kind of gave us the what.
Right.
And then I think we went from there, and I think after that, after they formulated the plan, it might have been a couple of meetings that I went to, but I don't remember did we have a large public meeting? I don't remember having.
I just remember some smaller meetings.
Yeah.
Are there other questions that we can answer while we have Kimberly Horn with us?
Well, I know you mentioned that this would be what I thought was a total 6-month deal. So if there's an opportunity to have it in 4, what does that look like?
Yeah, we're planning on 6 months just to really accommodate schedules and like the process. Making sure we have meetings, make sure that they're at the right time. So the first 2 months is really geared towards our review and setting up everything for success. Then we have about a 2-month window to really do the charrette and get everything done. And then we kind of have a 2-month window to wrap up. The wrap up window is the one that can be compressed a little bit. It may not take us 2 months to wrap up. It really depends on that feedback loop that we get. If after we do the document and this board thinks the document's in pretty good shape where it wants to be, then we wrap up a little bit faster. If there needs to go back and do a little bit more after the wrap up, then we're kind of budgeting that contingency of that we might have to make a few edits after we have the initial document done. So it's a 4 to 6 month project.
And what are we looking at as the board from now to September? What's going to be needed from us?
So I'm thinking in a short point, we'll have a memo that kind of outlines our takeaways from the existing plan, and then we'll have the website. And so one of our action for you is probably 3 items to review the memo to make sure we didn't miss anything from the existing plan that you'd like us to include that's important to you. 2 2 to review the website, which will include a survey and an interactive mapping portion. And then the third item would be to help us identify those stakeholders to make sure we have those stakeholders lined up to meet with when we have the in-person meetings. That's probably over the next 2 months that this board will be working on this with.
Okay.
What are, from y'all's experience, the concerns you have about doing this in 6 months? Things that we may miss in this process that we need to be really concerned with looking at and really focus on through this process?
Jeff, were you able to hear that question?
Yeah, if I heard correctly, what is the concern? What are the concerns for this process? I think one of the bases we're making is that, you know, the current vision is relatively on point, and we're really trying to understand implementation. What are the priorities? What's the next steps? What's the catalytic project and the implementation component to come out? What does the city take first? So the biggest thing is making sure that we understand what those universal possibilities are, that we're hearing the input from the stakeholders to make sure that we're not missing one of those potential projects. Because a lot of times we want to make sure that we understand what those list of potential projects or catalytic or implementation could be, so that there's not something we're missing. So it's really making sure we are having the largest cross section of stakeholders as possible. We don't want the same, you know, sometimes we miss a stakeholder group. So that's the biggest challenge, is making sure we identify all the different stakeholder groups, that we're not missing a specific group.
Let me ask a better question. What are the roadblocks, potential roadblocks, in us being able to do this within the 6 months and being able to complete this really within 4 months and within the deadline that we've set?
The biggest roadblock we manage on most of these projects is just kind of consensus building. When we get down to priorities, there's various opinions, and so it's really, when we do it faster, it's building that consensus process of, as we go through the design workshop and understanding and going through the online survey, to really communicate why we came to the conclusions we came to. And so sometimes, if, you know, various groups might have different priorities, and it's building the consensus over those priorities as we outline the implementation. So the shorter the time frame of the project, sometimes the more complicated it is to build the consensus. Sometimes it makes it easier because we get in, we formulate it, we get done. So sometimes the shorter time frame actually helps us. Sometimes it can hurt us, but I think the consensus building is the biggest roadblock.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, Jeff, we appreciate you joining us via web call here, and we'll look forward to the memo that your group is going to prepare. And as we move forward with the next steps, we'll continue to keep the board involved and let them know where they need to plug in and continue the process.
Yeah, look forward to it. Our team's excited to get working on this.
Right. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right.
Would you like to go back to
So
number
let's
one and start?
get back in order.
Yes.
So number one on the list, we need to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Yes, sir.
Has everybody had an opportunity to review, and any questions, anything out of the ordinary? So I need a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
And a second.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, got that done. Number two, so remove from the table and discuss the TIRZ bylaws. Good.
Mr. Chair, you'll have to make or accept a motion to remove from the
I'll
table.
make a motion to remove from the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the changes, additions that I made, I guess, sometime last couple of days? Anything that y'all want to change about them? You want me to go back to the drawing board? What are your thoughts?
When did you send those out, Dan? Because I didn't see those.
Yeah, I didn't.
Oh, you haven't
No, we
haven't
haven't
received
I haven't
them yet?
seen
We
that.
haven't seen the updated.
I had sent them, I guess, to Randy, I guess, back in May, I guess.
Any of those
Any of those
were sent out back
changes.
in May,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we had that copy, we had the
Yeah.
discussion on that, and then,
Yeah.
but I never saw anything.
No changes after what we got in May, or?
Yes, there is. And what I can do is we can get those to you, and what we can do is then you can take a look at those.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so we've made the changes that we'd requested last meeting, and we've sent those out. Okay, so we can do that.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think we'll get those to everybody, so we have
Yeah,
the
that's-
changes to discuss.
Let's do that, and then, like I say, we had discussed on the certain things we wanted and everything, so I went back to the drawing board and added and everything and took out and all that, so that's what I'll do. I'll re-forward them, so that Randy can get them to you.
clean copy and a red line copy, that
Yeah.
would be very.
Yeah, well, I've already got the red line copy, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I'll do that, okay? Then we'll
Okay.
discuss it,
Back on the table?
back on the table. Make a motion to
Alright,
put
so-
it back on the table.
Do I have a motion to put the bylaws discussion back on the table?
So made.
And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
The table's gonna break down.
All right, we've done 3. Number 4 is the downtown master plan marketing.
So,
I had reached out, one of the things that I think will make this successful is that if we tell everybody what's going on. It's that transparency and making everybody feel included and part of the process. So I had visited with Michael about what does the marketing of this look like, and what the steps could be to make use of, Devin and Magali, and making sure we're using all the tools to get the community involved.
So, and I would agree. I would say that we've got a very good public information team that could assist us with this. We have the ability to utilize social media, email, and even if it comes down, and this is a conversation I had with Jeff this morning, handing out flyers, walking door to door for downtown businesses. But I think there's other avenues that we can continue to get to the footprint outside of downtown. And again, it goes back to those social media sites. Similar to what we did on the university widening project with Kimley Horn, they posted out signs of the website that was the information site for university, and we're going to look at making signs similar to that we can post throughout town. We talked about putting some at some of the parks, things like that, so we can continue that footprint and outreach to get as much information back as we can.
Well, I mean, I don't think it'd be a bad idea, as they're working on the plan, to start communicating to the community. You have any thoughts of, what's your thoughts on what's going on downtown? Do you have any suggestions what to, and then we add those, and they might be part of the plan, they might not, but at least we get people start
Sure.
thinking what's going on.
Yeah.
They might
Yes,
be
sir.
one of those things. For example, say we need a lot more events downtown, or whatever it might be. At least we start getting that input, and then they can put that into the plan. So,
Yes, sir.
I think we need to start communicating down, to the community as well as downtown about, suggestions about, what do you have about what's going on downtown? Do you have any thoughts of what needs to go on downtown, those type of things?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
One of the things that obviously we need to keep in mind is that Kimley Horn has a kind of a good portion of their plan that's going to be involved in that community engagement. But I think to Gary's point, maybe as a TIRZ, we, along with Downtown Odessa and certainly city staff, one thought would be is, what's the likelihood or what's the interest by this group to maybe develop a survey? I mean, maybe folks may not know exactly what questions to ask. Maybe they've not been exposed to downtown. And as Gary pointed out, is it more restaurants? Is it more activities? I think that would be incredibly helpful. And that's one of those things that's relatively easy that we can send out. We can put on our social media pages. People can click on it. We can have Devin and her team promote. The other idea would be is that, there are a number of events, not necessarily in downtown, but in other locations. I would point to community development's block parties, which are pretty big events. We've got the rodeo coming up. We've got the fair coming up. In the past, when we've worked on other master plans, they've provided booth space, and we could certainly man that and then have a table available to take input from the public.
Yeah.
But I think, again, we'd have to have something developed that would make it easier for the average citizen to look at a slate of things and say that makes sense or no, it doesn't.
Ask them come like, well, I don't know, if you say, are you interested in this, and this, or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
then I think a lot of times people will do those if they don't have to think too
Well, I think if you can put it in the format that's relatively easy
Right.
and speedy, I think people are more apt to answer that.
And I think
Yeah.
we can start doing that now because,
Yeah.
you know, as they're developing,
Yeah, and again, I would say that let's think about all the events that occur between now and then and make sure that we have a presence at those events and make sure that every part of the community is engaged
So
in that.
and I agree, and that's why food drives don't work. People freak out when you tell them to go buy food to put in a bin. You have to tell them to bring peanut butter. You can't leave it open to cans. But I have visited with YPO and hoped they could get involved with a project just like this, doing a survey. I hadn't thought about anything like that. I didn't know where. I didn't want to duplicate anything that Kimley Horn was going to do. So if that's a possibility, I think that's a great idea.
Well, I'd say let's work in conjunction with Kimley, and because this is going to be
Right,
part of their engagement
absolutely.
anyway.
But to figure out a way, kind of like Randy Ham's done with the cultural plan, that we could have a QR code. It could be at restaurants downtown Hampton. It could be across town.
Mr. Norris?
One of the things that, and Mike, I'll commend you that I think that the city did well with the past year, because I think we learned a lot, and
Yes,
that
sir.
was with the, I'm saying PPP money, that's not what the correct term,
Sure.
but that money that we were given for.
CARES money, yes, sir.
Right.
CARES,
And then the CARES Act.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And then also what the city did, and what, I guess it was Devin and her team did with the, promotion
Yeah.
of all the COVID stuff.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that we were very conscientious about, that came up in a lot of those discussions, were pockets of communities or citizens of communities that don't read the newspaper. They're not on social media.
Yeah.
They don't have, they're not gonna go get a QR code. So making sure that whatever we do with this, we're not leaving out that pocket of communities. Because I think that whatever we did before in the past year, the lessons we learned,
Mhm.
were very effective in reaching folks
Yeah.
who might not. And so I don't wanna miss
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
while we're doing this.
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right, Mr. Norris. What we found out is that there's that community, and you have to go to them.
Right.
And so we will offer up our services through our community development staff who helped in that part of it. I mean, we went literally door to door. And we're certainly willing to do that again if that means we get the sort of participation that we need from every segment of the community. Yes, sir.
And downtown Odessa has a great social media presence that people watch and look at and pay attention to. So I think we do need to take advantage of all the tools.
So Philip will begin that discussion with Kim and Marlon. We'll start
Okay.
letting the survey, get it out to you guys and get your opinion on it.
Work on that.
Okay,
Further discussion on this item?
those were my questions.
Ready, we
And,
can move to the
as
next
far as
one.
the future downtown projects, I know something we had really talked about and wanted to undertake was I hate to keep calling them the low-hanging fruit, but the something that we can do in the next 6 months that shows some movement, that shows some action, that shows that somebody's paying attention and that we need parking downtown and we need XYZ fill in the blank. So Philip has put together a quick slideshow. I had visited with Steve Patton with the Parks Department to try and just kind of figure out if he had anything on his list. With Michael, what do you have on your list? I know we've all had some ideas of things that are needed. So if you want to go ahead and
Sure.
run through this, I think there's some great ideas in here.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, as was stated, there are projects that we visited with our Parks Department about that they feel can be accomplished fairly quick, and so we brought those in here just to remind that the major portion of the master plan that we're working on will help with the larger infrastructure type projects, catalytic projects that we're going to look at for downtown. But some of these items that we can visit on are smaller projects that we can get through. So as it relates to what the TIRZ can fund, we have our plan that's filed with the Secretary of State that states what our funding can go towards. So one of the items that I pulled out that we can fund towards gateways, linear parks, corridor landscaping, and plazas. And we've talked quite a bit about parking. in our 4th Street, 4th and Grant parking lots. We've recently started doing work in. We've moved those parking lots to LED lighting. We resurfaced the parking lots, and we've also restriped those areas. But we talked with our Parks Department, and something that they are suggesting is that we start developing a standardized footprint as far as lighting, benches, trash containers. And so what they looked at these 2 locations, as they are right off of Grant Street, our main street per se downtown, is basically redoing the landscape in that area. And so I took these pictures this morning. I'm sure everyone's familiar, but you can see from the picture we have sod in these areas, but it's weathered over the years. It is on an old irrigation system. There's a bench there that has probably seen better days as well. Again, just a different view. We can see some of our sod pulling out on us there. Some of these trees, according to our Parks Department, are reaching, they don't know if it was the cold or disease that has caused them to stunt some of their growth, and some of the limbs have had to be removed due to some I guess dead foliage that's coming off of them. So their suggestion is to come through, returf those areas around those parking lots, remove those aging trees and replace them. We do have a tree farm in the city that we could remove those trees, come back and put something in that would be aesthetically pleasing down there. And they're suggesting moving to a drip irrigation system. That way they can also add in flower beds in that area. As we said, moving to new seating, looking at new types of benches and trash containers down there. And we also have 2 greenhouses in the city as well, and you probably will see at locations such as Knoll Plaza, and the JBS and Parkway was one of our recent areas that we put flowers out. So there's an area that we could put flower beds for this area. Something that Steve, that I'll give him credit for, that he thought of as well. If you think of the parking lot on 4th and Grant that is on the east side, we have what we call Rusty the Bull. That's kind of a nickname we threw out there. But on the other side, there's no public art. And something that he was suggesting is some type of LED lighting with a concrete pad, where we could have some kind of quarterly art mural display that gets moved in and out. So it's always something new and refreshing that's coming in that area. And we talked to Randy Ham briefly about that. He thinks that's something that he can program in that area. And so again, these are high visible areas. I'll tell you, I went to eat lunch downtown, and that both parking lots were full, and so they are heavily used. People do see them quite often, so it would be an enhancement to the corridor there. And the Parks Department has an estimated cost of about $100,000 for that.
Would there be an opportunity, I know Mr. Russell has mentioned this, to get more spots into those areas, more parking into, I don't know if it's reimagined or lose some of the turf or whatever.
Sure. That's something we can definitely look out through this process. Something that we would have to most likely factor in is some type of professional service and engineer to look at how we would deal with the irrigation that's existing, water lines, things like that may be in that area, and the electrical that's underground for those lights. But I think that's something we could definitely look at and see if we could accomplish.
And does this spending fall under the 1% that Randy gets?
So if this project, Mr. Mayor, remind me, the cost at $250,000 a project for it to trigger the 1%.
Phil, I think it's yes.
I believe it's any project over
Okay.
$250,000 triggers the 1% for art. So it would not necessarily trigger the art, but it's something that we could always incorporate into the project if we see fit.
Yeah, well, if we built him a stage, we got to figure out how to put something there.
Is there any concern, the area between, from where the hospital is around 4th Street, all the way probably up to where maybe the Marriott is, then less that area, but I guess 4th and 5th Street there is a very high transient area. Is there concern about putting art in the transient population there?
Sure. So
I don't want to say that in any disparaging way, because we still need to take care of those folks, but
Sure.
is there any concerns about that, or where is that taken into consideration?
Sure, I think that's definitely something, Mr. Norris, that we need to take into account. I will tell you, at Knoll Plaza, we had fountains that have continually have to be rehabilitated because they are damaged by some of that population that's in that area. So whatever we put out, similar to to rusty that's out there. We would have to make sure it's something that can be cleaned and repaired in a pretty cost-effective manner if it does happen to get damaged. Yes, sir.
The other question I have is on Grant between Fourth and Fifth on the west side. And I don't know so much on the east side, but there's trees there. Is there, in this plan, is there a plan to replace those trees, or is there gonna be, flower beds and things on those? What's gonna happen actually with those?
Sure. So this is all preliminary. This is what just an opening discussion with the TIRZ board. If this is something that the board is wishing to pursue as a project, we can definitely work with Mr. Patton and our Parks Department to draw something up. We can collaborate through these meetings of we would want a flower bed here, or trees in this location, but this is all conceptual at this point.
It just, I'm trying to think, and I may have visualized this incorrectly, but as you go through Grant, I think that's really the only place once you pass the courthouse that really only has trees on that
Yes, sir.
side of the street. So it's a little out of place.
No, there's trees on both sides.
There's trees on both sides, and then you have trees down Fifth Street as well, and I believe Fourth Street has trees as well.
And yeah, I think that's worth noting that, you know, at the end of all this, there's probably gonna be some sort of plan for Grant to redo sidewalks and landscaping and that kind of stuff, I would imagine. I know that that's been an agenda item for a while.
Yeah, I think part of anything that you decide to do that really changes configuration, let's keep in mind that
Yeah.
at some point, there's a much bigger plan, if you will.
And thinking through the rest of it, and I'm sorry, this is my fault because I started questioning it, but let's run through the whole thing and then we can back up, because there's other things in here that.
Sure.
Yeah, one quick question on that.
Sure.
Do we have an idea as to the cost, whether it's Parks Department or who is doing, maintaining all that? I mean, I'm thinking turf and flower. I see the Parks Department down there a lot.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Along, you know, and should we be considering things instead of putting in irrigation and things like, should we be thinking artificial turf or things like or xeriscaping or other
Sure.
things that might give us a little better maintenance bang for the buck over the long haul?
Yes, sir. Well, that's something we can definitely consider. I will tell you that, as you said, we have a parks crew of 3 that maintains the downtown area, Knoll Plaza, City Hall, Municipal Court, Police Department. So they are already mowing in that area now, so we could continue with turf in that area, but we could see conceptual plans for moving towards something that's xeriscape. And I will tell you the artificial turf, and even though it's advertised as less maintenance, it seems to be just as much maintenance with having to continue to blow it off, or someone sticking gum in it, or dogs using the restroom in it. So it's definitely it's not a zero maintenance aspect
I've
to
got
it.
a turf lawn, I love it.
Okay.
But it's not maintenance for
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, let's run through the rest of them,
Okay.
and then we can kind of come back.
Another item we discussed were the flower pots that are downtown. So currently we have 12 flower pots that are downtown, and again, our Parks Department maintains these. We have that crew of 3 that is supervised by a certified horticulturalist that ensures that we have plant material in those pots. And again, those are all grown from seeds in our greenhouse, so we're not purchasing expensive plants. We raise those up. But again, going back to the master plan, we're able to provide landscaping to the corridor and enhance public plazas. So again, we have 12 of these pots downtown. I took these pictures this morning. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the pots that have been placed in. So this is on Texas, facing the LCA building that's downtown. And it's great to see that those have taken off so much, and definitely with the foliage coming out of them. Here's one in front of the convention center. And again, we have 12 of these. What Mr. Patton was recommending is that we add or double what we've got now and add an additional 12. His cost to get the pot, and I don't know if anyone's actually put hands on the pot. They're plastic, and I'll tell you that they get hit every now and then. So the good thing is once they're hit, we are able to pop it back out, throw it back on the street, and we've got spare pots at the parks office we can change out the plant material with. So they won't overly damage vehicles if they're hit, but they're also easy to get back up and going again. So again, it's a $1,500 cost to get those started back up, and so an additional 12 would be about $18,000 to bring back in.
Are those self-watering?
They're self-watering. We put water in them once a week, Mr. Murrow, and they are able to self-water.
And that's something that if we did put out 12 more right now, if they needed to be moved, that doesn't sound like that's a huge deal.
Right, that's something we could accomplish fairly fast, just being able to order those pots and getting them in. Usually, I believe when we did the last ones, there was about a 6-week lead time on getting them down here.
Okay.
And the next item that we visited on, this is something that's still very preliminary in discussion, and we don't have costs necessarily associated with this, but something that the TIRZ board could keep in mind, and this would most likely be something that we would look at in the master plan, is improving our public transportation downtown. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Easy Rider bus stop that's across from Knoll Plaza. It's just a sea of concrete. There's nothing aesthetically pleasing with it. It's just a way in and out for the buses. And going back to the plan that we have for the TIRZ, we are able to update public infrastructure, and that includes services for public transportation. So it is located off of Lincoln and 5th Street, and the city does own that property, so we would have the ability to provide enhancements in that area. But again, here's pictures. It's just concrete sidewalks, and there's a couple of trees on the exterior of the facility there. And this is something that Mr. Patton from Parks also looked at as well, that even if we added pots to this area, or if we were to pull off some of these the sidewalking in the back behind these pavers, including more trees or xeriscaping, something to bring it back to life, and it's not just a blank slate that's out there, especially across from the library and the parks. We did reference some other areas, and of course they have a little larger footprint, but this is the city of Lubbock. This is one of their bus stations that they have downtown. It's one of their transfer stations, so it's some brick awnings, some shade for folks that are utilizing the public transportation, trees, turf, things of that nature in that area. And then we found this one that was pretty interesting. Was the city of Amarillo, and they purchased an old building that had I believe it was a dry cleaner drive-through, and they were able to accommodate a bus through that area there. But I think there's some unique things that we could do, and these are just examples. So those were 3 projects that I believe Mr. Patton talked to the chairman about, and we wanted to present to the board. Again, it comes down to funding. I will tell you that the board, after paying for the master plan, should have about $213,000 at its disposal, and that's after this year's collection. So we won't have another collection until spring of next year. So that is something to keep in mind.
Is that the Easy Rider thing?
Yes.
I mean, is there any possibility that Easy Rider helps with some of that?
Sure. So the other assistant city manager, Cindy Muncie, does attend those meetings, and that is something they've come to the city about seeking assistance for. But they have the ability to apply for grants for those type of items, and they would definitely seek those grants if we wanted to improve that area.
Do we have any idea what the usage of that station is in terms of just head count on a daily basis?
I do not have that with me, sir, but I can get that information to you.
You know, we might want to.
Transfer station?
It is.
That's a popular one.
It is, yeah. I mean, I don't know if there was others. You know, we might want the statistics on any others in proximity, I guess.
I'll pull that information, and I'll make sure that the board receives that.
On the 2 projects, excluding the potted plants,
Yes,
is
sir.
there any way we could possibly get some conceptual plans for those 2 projects, just to look at some kind of new design that
Yes, sir.
someone might have in mind?
Yes, sir.
And then if any cost would be associated, what would that be?
Sure. As far as the design,
On the conceptual plans.
Sure. I think internally we could start with some conceptuals. If we get too in depth with it, we may need to enlist the help of a landscape architect. But I think internally we can provide some rough sketches on what that would look like.
I think that could create some conversation about.
Yeah, I think rough sketches sounds good, and I like Jeff's idea of the xeriscape as well. So
Yeah.
maybe we could
Me too.
render it both ways.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Because that's the first thing I thought about. Got to keep watering that. Looks like my yard.
Well, I think the xeriscape can be more attractive too.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at areas, Scottsdale, Vegas. They have great
Some of the
xeriscaping.
things the school district has done recently around school entrances and all, is a lot of xeriscaping, and it turned out nice.
Nice. Yes, sir. we can definitely pull that information, and I will work with our Parks Department to provide some sketches to the group to continue discussing.
Yeah, and I don't think we anticipate any changes to the design guidelines, particularly through this process. So, things like this could go ahead and, start getting sketches and ideas behind it, for sure.
Chairman, I would say to the extent that part of what my anticipation is out of the master plan is good ideas or great ideas, hopefully, on what downtown needs to look like.
Right.
Beyond the what we have in place now. So I am looking for them to produce a product that will show us what our what sidewalks might look like, what that landscaping might look like, what sort of seating should be included in downtown, what sort of light fixtures. So I think a lot of those elements ultimately will also be part of what we get through our downtown master plan. So I would say that as we think about these things, let's keep in mind that we've got the master plan. So we want to make sure that whatever we develop and or design will complement that as well.
Yeah.
Michael, you might mention while you're up there, the college is looking to do some things downtown. So
Yes, sir.
So,
Let me give you a point of some history here. About a couple of years ago, we had a conversation with the college about what thoughts they may have about downtown. It was a good conversation. They really hadn't formulated a plan necessarily, but I think ultimately what they wanted was a downtown presence. And I think that conversation, quite frankly, went dormant for a couple of years. I think the college was tied up with several other projects. But I think as a result of a recent gift that you got, I think you are now looking at, are there possibilities in downtown? And so what we've talked about is there an opportunity for an activation space in downtown. So those are the things that Dr. Williams and myself are talking through now. And we've got a couple of ideas of where that might be, but we want to work out the specifics. We want to work out the details.
Explain to me what an activation space is.
Jeff, what we've talked about is a space where someone could have an event, not necessarily a green space, but where, for example, I think the college's interest is they want to be able to bring some of what they do at the college, for example, some of their art, some of their symphony stuff that they do, some of the musicians that they have. They want to be able to come down and have those sort of events. They've talked about a space that could be activated during the week or weekend, where you would have food trucks and other activities going on at the same time. Just this whole idea of bringing people to downtown and how can we best accomplish that is really what they're after. I think that's in the interest of all of us.
I'd like to see some of their culinary.
Yeah, I don't think that Dr. Williams has left anything off the table. They want this to be a multi-purposed space.
we talked about that because a lot of people do not realize what the culinary does out there. So we talked about somehow having an opportunity to down here and in the long range plan, I mean, they're not all, but we looked at possibly, you eventually have, we teach our culinary possibly downtown.
Yeah.
And then people come in at noon, they go over there, get something to eat, those type of things.
Yeah, he's mentioned things like, in conjunction with the culinary, have a fundraising event kind of thing. So.
This is kind of like Houston has like the Discovery Green, something like that? Is that
Somewhere similar to it, yes, sir. Yeah. Obviously, we don't have that number of acreage, but something on the much smaller scale. But I guess, as I mentioned, we're still talking through specifics and to try and identify what's the best site for that.
Just, I guess one thing I would like to observe, maybe the pot project with being $18,000 for 12 pots, and that could make it immediate change. I say, you said 6 weeks to get those in?
Typically, yes, sir.
Yeah, so I think we could have something by the fall, and I know those are mobile, so if we want to pick different locations or master plan changes, some we could move those around. So I'd like to make a motion that we would go ahead and procure those pots for $18,000.
I think what we can do is get that ordered and then come back to this group for your authorization to purchase. Will that work at the next meeting?
We want to order prior to.
Well, we want to have the invoice and then get their authorization to.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't think that's necessarily on the agenda for a motion today, right?
No, sir, it was just
So-
general for down. So we can get that information to the board
Okay.
for approval.
I agree, so.
Yeah, and I think the main thing is to mention that whatever we do, it needs to fit the master plan. Like I say, these things can be moved, you know.
Yeah.
You put something up and then 6 months, a year later, you go tear it down. So whatever we do, it needs to be things that, like I said, these are mobile, so that's not a problem.
Okay.
We'll get that information.
One more.
As we're discussing future ideas for downtown, we touched on it earlier, and that's parking. So parking continues to be, I used to work down at the Community Development Department, and parking was never an issue. If you've tried to get a parking space at Municipal Plaza now, it's almost impossible, and we've added 40 some odd spots. It's a big issue. We have plans, the city has plans. Directly behind the city's clinic, we own some property there. We have plans to get that paved so we can provide more parking, get some of that parking off the street, make it more accessible to businesses and citizens who may want to park there. We've discussed parking at another location. Ideally, that parking would be at 4th and Jackson. That's an area that we've previously designed internally to see if we could add more parking. So we could come back and have that discussion. We could have our traffic engineer, Hal, bring some of those ideas and plans and show them to this group. I think we have a few dollars set aside for some of that, but perhaps that could be enhanced with some of the TIRZ money, and that would allow us to accomplish those projects. So that's something we can certainly put together and bring back to you guys.
Yeah, and I'm just in agreement. I'd like to see anything we can get started, and
Okay.
just so that it doesn't look like we're sitting here till September.
Okay, very good.
I think we've talked about this in the department, if I'm just misremembering. Did we talk about parallel parking on 4th Street and 5th Street and all of that? I don't know.
We've added several, not parallel, but angled parking. Angled parking, we had enough sufficient space. And so what we can ask Hal to do is look for other opportunities like that. We've done that on 6th Street. We've done that on Lee. Where else have we done that? We've done that on Jackson. Yeah.
When we had the last meeting, we were talking about it, I went back and looked, and just from, on that 4th Street, with the parking lot we just showed, I think there was like 5, maybe 6 parking spaces.
Sure.
I'm just curious, if we did angled parking, how much more parking that would add
Yeah.
to that area?
We'll have them analyze those opportunities. It's got to be a certain width, right? If it doesn't meet that width, we can't change the parking. But Hal can certainly look at those opportunities if they're out there.
With the flower pots, to me, especially if we're adding that many more possibly, that kind of becomes an identity point for downtown. And so when some of these new parking lots happen, to put one of those pots
Sure.
or more out there, it helps define downtown, in my view.
Great idea. Yes, sir.
There's with our master plan, that'll be kind of rendered into if we wanted to change street parking and things of that nature as well, right?
Yes, sir.
And going back to 4th and Jackson as an example, when it's not being a parking lot, is there opportunity to let food trucks park there or have it be, because on Saturday.
Yeah. So I think the great thing, Mr. Chairman, is that if it's city-owned property, we really have the ability to activate it any way that we want. And certainly Ms. Alexa can help us make those arrangements. But I think we should take and look for every one of those opportunities we can take.
Yeah, could we, find a list of places, because I just keep hearing that, food truck. Why? I got a message yesterday. What are y'all doing about food trucks?
Yeah. Again, if it's city-owned property, it's relatively easy. We can shut it down, make sure it's not interfering with anybody's business. But yeah, we have parking lots, for example, directly on the south side of 2nd Street, where a lot of the folks park when they come to jury trials. So that's a space we haven't activated. It's got awnings. I mean, I think it makes for a perfect place to maybe have some of the events to see how it works there. And I think we need to move it, right? So if it doesn't work on one spot, we move it to another to find out where the best synergy is.
Okay. She's going to quit coming to these meetings.
Hey, Alexis, since you are here, could you give us a little quick update on the 3 projects that we approved for facade and infrastructure grant, just to kind of get everybody up to date? And I've noticed that there doesn't seem like there's a lot moving on those, and I was wondering if you might know why we're not seeing construction.
Mr. Chair, that's not on an item on the agenda. I don't believe that we can cover that.
All right, Jeff, if you wanna stop,
We can,
fill you all in.
Okay.
Would it not fit under future?
I was kind that's that's the future of downtown.
my attorney's telling me no.
That's the future. All right, well,
We'll just
seems
start
we've
putting
come
a
to the end of
generic-
it then.
We'll just start putting a generic downtown projects,
Yeah.
item on there.
That would work.
Could we include that as an agenda item for our next meeting?
Yeah.
So it might be nice to get an update on that.
But I think what we could do is just give you an update, have her write me an update or fill up an update and send it out to you guys.
Okay.
We do that. Okay. That's all we've got on my
Okay.
side.
The end. Any other questions or discussion about the things we've talked about today? I tried. All right, well, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourned.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.